The world does not run on compassion, fairness, or hollow promises of an eternally stable economy. It runs on the brutal breathing rhythm of a monster called the cycle. When the crowd is drunk on the parties of artificial growth, when cheap money floods every corner of life like a sweet poison, that is when the scythe of darkness begins to be sharpened in terrifying silence. There is a cruel truth that mainstream media has always tried to conceal. Money never disappears in a crisis. It only carries out a great migration. It flows from the pockets of the panicked into the pockets of the patient, from the hands of those who treat assets as lifeless numbers into the hands of those who understand that assets are absolute power to control the world. A crisis has never been the period at the end of development. It is a powerful comma separating an old class of the rich clinging to outdated glory from a new class of the rich quietly rising from the ashes. History does not record the fearful. It carves the names of those who saw golden opportunity while blood was being spilled on the trading floors. And today's podcast episode can be a strategic map to help you escape the fate of a lamb and step into the ranks of the shepherds. Welcome to the real world, where you will hear truths that society does not want you to know. The sheep shearing machine, the elite's ruthless script. To become a winner, you must see through the rules of the game played by the financial gods. The global financial system is a machine designed with precision to carry out a periodic sheep shearing process, a ruthless calculated filter. The money printing phase. The predator's seduction. Every cycle begins with a phase drenched in sweetness. Central banks cut interest rates to extremely low levels. Money is printed recklessly and pumped into the system under the banner of stimulating the economy. This is when the flock, meaning the vast majority of workers and small retail investors, is fattened up. When money becomes too easy to earn, reason is eclipsed by greed. People borrow to amplify profits, to buy houses, buy cars, and pour into risky speculative assets. Euphoria spreads. Everyone thinks they are an investment genius. In reality, they are simply being fattened in preparation for a great purge. The tightening phase. The scythe emerges from the shadows. When society's debt level hits its ceiling, when greed has pushed asset prices to absurd levels, the machine begins to reverse. Central banks suddenly raise interest rates under the excuse of controlling inflation. Cheap money disappears, replaced by expensive borrowing costs. Those standing at the peak of debt leverage begin to suffocate. This is when the shepherd starts pulling in the nets, turning dreams of quick wealth into a nightmare of insolvency. The asset squeeze and takeover phase. The great migration of power. When crisis erupts, panic spreads like a virus. Asset values from real estate to stocks collapse without breaks. The crowd, crushed by debt pressure and extreme fear, is forced to dump its most valuable assets at bargain prices just to salvage a little cash. This is precisely when financial tycoons and the new rich step in armed with enormous cash reserves accumulated in silence. They do not merely buy assets, they buy the future itself, control of supply points and the economic bloodstream at laughably discounted prices. A new order is established, and those who do not understand the rules will work their entire lives to repay the debts owed to the very people who created the game. History's rhythm. Crises as engineered resets. History does not repeat, but it always rhymes. The great crises of the past were not random accidents. They were calculated tsunamis designed to restructure global power. The Great Depression of 1929. The collapse of an era. The 1920s were an age of excessive frenzy in America. Stocks were treated as a shortcut to paradise. But on Black Tuesday, the bubble exploded, dragging down thousands of banks. And the truth beneath it, while millions of Americans stood in breadlines, tycoon dynasties like Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan used the period to consolidate empires. They swallowed up oil companies, railroads, and small banks that were barely breathing. The Depression destroyed the rising middle class, yet it created a terrifying concentration of financial power in the hands of a small elite. They understood that when blood is in the streets, that is the time to build a throne. The Asian financial crisis. 1997. A cross-border shearing earthquake. The storm began with Thailand's baht and quickly wiped out the economic achievements of Southeast Asia's tiger economies. Currencies collapsed, foreign reserves ran dry, and nations fell into mountains of debt. And the truth beneath it, this was a textbook example of using financial tools and pressure from international institutions like the IMF to force restructuring. Multinational corporations and Western financial elites rushed in under the name of rescue, but in reality, they took over domestic banks, strategic supply points, and resource extraction rights. A new generation of new rich in Asia rose by aligning with large capital flows rather than trying to resist the violent tide. The US financial crisis of 2008, the greatest debt transfer in history, the subprime nightmare, not only brought down Lehman Brothers at the time, it also pushed the entire global financial system to the brink of annihilation. People lost homes and jobs, but look closely who truly benefited. And the truth beneath it, the too big to fail, banks too large to collapse, were bailed out with the tax money of the victims themselves. After 2008, giant investment funds such as BlackRock and Vanguard rose with unprecedented power. They bought millions of foreclosed properties and turned an entire generation of homeowners into permanent renters on their own land. This was the moment capital perfected the art of control, through debt turning workers into enslaved gears, in a machine where the elites hold every legal checkpoint, knowing when the scythe stops. Signals from the system. So how do you know when the scythe has stopped cutting and dawn is approaching? This is survival knowledge if you want to stand among the next kings. Watch the system's signals. First, the yield curve inversion. A yield curve inversion is a death omen for the economy, but when it starts to flatten again or returns to normal after a long inversion, that is also when the system has already drained enough blood. It signals that the tightening cycle has peaked and a new liquidity cycle is quietly being prepared. Second, the central bank pivot. When central banks stop raising rates and begin signaling quantitative easing or liquidity support, that is the starting gun of a new era. The crowd at this moment is often still drowning in pessimism because of unemployment headlines, but smart money has already begun quietly accumulating assets. Third, the VIX fear index and extreme despair. When the headlines are saturated with gloom, when the last investors finally capitulate and cut losses because they cannot withstand the pressure. This is the market bottom, the new rich act, when fear peaks, when the crowd has completely given up. As Gordon Buffett once said, be greedy when others are fearful. Fourth, takeovers enabled by law and policy. Watch for governments passing new laws under the label of stabilizing the economy that in reality facilitate mergers and acquisitions. When law starts clearing the path for financial centralization, it is a sign that the takeover game is entering its final stage to establish a new order. The new rich mindset. 7 pillars of steel. In the eye of the storm, the difference between those who get crushed and those who win lies in 7 pillars of steel. 1. Focus on position, not survival. Do not only try to avoid sinking. Watch which islands emerge first when the tide goes out. The new rich do not try to flee during a crisis. They try to stand in the right place when dawn returns. Being correctly positioned for a new cycle matters more than sprinting within the old one. 2. Crisis is a truth filter. In euphoric times, even trash can shine. But when crisis comes, only real value remains. The next generation of the rich does not need to be genius creators of something new. They only need patience waiting for artificial models to collapse, then picking up the real value that the crowd throws away in fear diamonds discarded in the mud. 3. The art of restraint and iron discipline. The biggest mistake of losers is trying to bet big to recover losses while the market is falling. In contrast, new kings are the most cautious. They never spend all their ammunition in one shot. They stay in the game as long as possible because they understand the last survivor is the one who gets to set the price. 4. Split mind thinking between 2 lines of fire. You must be clear-headed enough not to be dragged into the crowd's panic vortex, yet disciplined enough not to be burned by impatience. Calmness amid volatility is the most valuable asset. Be an objective observer, not an emotional gambler. 5. Use the slowdown to upgrade your intelligence. When the world slows down, you have a chance to upgrade yourself without the noise of competition. Use this time to deeply understand the rules of the game, behavioral psychology, and the mechanics of debt. When the market recovers, your knowledge becomes an advantage that no amount of money can buy. 6. A position test for the 30-40 age group. This is a stage where you cannot afford mistakes. Pressure from family and society can push you into rushed decisions. Remember, one correct decision in a crisis can save you 20 years of hard labor. Do not let short-term pressure blind long-term vision. Hide weight and time your move intelligently. 7. History records the one who endures to the end. Every great empire is built on the ashes of its predecessor. After each crisis, the world order is reset. Do you want to be the one who writes the new rules or the one forced to obey them? Your silent preparation today is the answer to your position tomorrow. The elites take over control by debt and law. We live in an era where control is no longer enforced by raw violence, but by debt and complex legal barriers. The elite use crises to perform a major social surgery with two core objectives. First, absolute control of physical assets through financial debt squeezes. Mega corporations acquire real estate, farmland, and energy sources. The ultimate goal is to turn private ownership into a rental ecosystem. They want the majority of workers to become renters of their own lives, from housing and transportation to essential needs. And when you own nothing, you become easier to control than ever. Second, tightening supply chains and controlling labor. Crisis is the perfect excuse for large-scale workforce purges, automation, and stricter regulations. This creates massive pressure on workers, forcing them to work more for lower real wages. At the same time, financial elites use financial measures to control everything from raw materials to distribution systems, leaving small businesses no room to survive, forcing them to merge or disappear. This is a war to establish an order where big fish swallow small fish. Go with the current survival art and the answer. The answer is never try to fight the system with useless anger. You cannot stop the tide, but you can learn to surf the violent waves. Understand the cycle so you can turn the system's power into your own launchpad. Liquidity is the lifeblood. Always keep part of your assets in cash or cash equivalents with high liquidity so you are ready for once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Do not be paper rich with no cash to act. Manage debt, like managing your lifeline. Get rid of consumer debt immediately. In a crisis, debt is the chain that prevents you from moving when opportunity appears. Clean up your balance sheet before the storm hits. Diversify into real assets. When the value of financial paper can evaporate, focus on things with real utility, real estate that generates cash flow, shares of businesses that hold essential infrastructure or commodities with durable value. Understand the rules deeply. Learn macroeconomics, monetary policy, and financial law yourself. Do not listen to what elites say in the media. Watch what they do with interest rates and money flows. Knowledge is your shield. Superior adaptability. The new world does not need people who are only good at one thing. It needs people who can relearn everything in the shortest time. Become versatile and flexible. The power of silence. Train yourself to make decisions based on data and logic, not temporary emotions or sensational headlines. Calmness in crisis is an asset more valuable than gold. This great cleansing battle is not for the weak, nor for those who like to fantasize about an easy life. It is for those with the courage to stare into the abyss and see gold in the darkness. A crisis is a reminder that the world always has inevitable elimination. You cannot change the breathing rhythm of the universal cycle, but you can absolutely change your position within it. The new rich of the next decade are being forged right now in this very moment, through silent preparation, iron discipline, unshakable belief, and self-mastery. Stop complaining about the system's unfairness. Start studying the rules so you can use the system itself to elevate your life and your position. When the crowd out there is panicking, fleeing, and losing everything, be the one who stands firm, observing with the eyes of a predator, preparing for the greatest leap of your life. Dawn will return soon, but remember, when the sun rises, it will shine brightest only on those who are already standing on the mountaintop beforehand. Where will you be when that day comes, among the crowd at the foot of the mountain crying, or on the peak of power and freedom? The crisis does not come to kill you. It comes to select. Rise up and become the chosen one.